Hello once again. Yes, I am a radical race driver, motorsport enthusiast, and most importantly of all, an avid, caring sim racer with over 20 years in the game. My last video got way more attention than I ever thought it would, and in this video I want to address two areas of discussion that came up in the hundreds of comments. Namely, why is this video so very long, and what wheel settings are you using? So in this episode I'm going to explain in a compelling, succinct and time-bending 5 minutes what wheel settings really make a difference, finally reveal what my settings were, and when it comes to AC Evo's force feedback, whether any of it really matters when it comes to driving at the limit of grip available. Let the experiments begin. So what happens if you turn all settings completely off, with force feedback gain set to a level of preference which for me is 80% because I enjoy feeling strong force feedback? Well, this made the wheel noticeably looser and easier to rotate around the centre. It's almost like damping was turned off to an extent, but instead replaced with an equivalent springy force. This made vibrations from curbs a bit more noticeable and clearer to feel. It also definitely made the self-centering forces a touch more obvious around the centre when weaving the car left to right. And finally, it made it easier to countersteer because the wheel was looser all round. However, and this is a really critical point, just because it made it easier to countersteer did not mean that the quality of communication coming from the game was better in any way. I will come back to this point at the end of the video. My lap time on a completely default setup was a 1 minute 27.7. Now we set the dynamic damping to max, and these were the settings I had in my first video. And what's changed from the first experiment? Well, that springy self-centering force is now replaced with a force that makes it feel like you're steering through a thick soup, with the soup changing in consistency. As a result, you get a more rubbery feel. The information coming through is exactly the same as in the first experiment, but because it requires more force to turn the wheel, you naturally tend to be a bit less frantic and your inputs become smoother. I personally preferred this more rubbery feel compared to the springy feel when you turn dynamic damping completely off. My lap time ended up being exactly the same as before. Now we set speed sensitivity to max, and as you can see, everything else is turned off. After immediately doing a 1 minute 27.7 and after that a 1 minute 27.3, what were my conclusions? Well, it made the wheel feel less springy, and again, almost like that there was a bit of dynamic damping turned back on. In terms of the level of communication, again, there was no difference to the previous two experiments. Right. So now what happens if I have everything turned off and steering filter on max? Well, straight out the gate, I did a 1 minute 27.4 followed by a 27.0, a significant improvement from the last few hot laps. However, again, I felt no change at all in the forces coming through or any change in the level of communication of what the car was doing. At this point, I'm now getting quicker because I'm learning the game, not because the settings are making any difference. Now with everything off, let's turn steering assist weight on max. And once again, there is no difference at all in the forces coming through and no change in the communication to allow me to drive the car any quicker. And the final experiment with everything off, let's put vibrations on max and see what happens. Well, the answer here is not a lot at all. With this setting, I felt absolutely no change in the strength of the vibration effects going over curves or any changes in force when compared to the other experiments. As a final experiment, I tried a combination of different settings and I felt again no discernible difference or change in the communication or level of forces coming through the wheel. One final thing that dawned on me, and this is the point I wanted to come back to, was that in some oversteer moments where I was able to catch the car quickly from what seemed like an impossible angle, whilst it was happening, I distinctly remember in those split seconds thinking whether I'd applied enough opposite lock to catch the slide, and then, when the car regained stability, thinking that was a mixture of luck and simply reacting entirely to the visuals to know how much lock to roughly apply. It was never a precise amount of opposite lock to use the slide in any way or try and keep the momentum through the corner. It was a reaction entirely based off visuals, not feel. My conclusions are exactly the same as those in my first inaugural AC Evo video, which I'll summarise thusly. AC Evo lacks two critical pieces of information: force feedback to tell you what degree you're understeering and to what extent the rear is starting to rotate around, or in other words, a seat of pants effect. Turning dynamic damping completely off does make the wheel looser, but it makes no difference at all to the quality of information coming through the force feedback, and therefore does not enable you to feel the car any better around the limits of available grip. If you want a complete and thorough breakdown of exactly what forces are coming through in different states of car balance, do go and watch my first video for a more comprehensive analysis. It is rather long, but see it as an opportunity to spend some quality time away from your family. And so there we are folks, you've asked for it and I've delivered it. A short, concise video going through all the settings and summarising exactly what AC EVO is lacking. I am but a real race driving, sim racing public servant, here to respond to all of you. In the next episode, I drive some of the road cars as well as the other race cars and see if AC EVO has a surprise in store. You might find the conclusion surprising and overwhelming. Stay tuned, subscribe, and come back soon for more detailed and thoughtful analysis from me, race driver, sim racer, and all-round nice guy. Until next time, bye for now.